All right, so we're going to be writing a program to read this data that was meant to be printed out, but it's now printed to a file, to read this and put it in such a way that we can do some analysis with it on Excel. And so the data that I'm going to need here to pull out is going to be a station, the call, the date. Might as well stick in all caps. And then the precipitation, P-R-E-C-I-P. What else is here? Is there anything else that I'm kind of interested in? Here we're getting percent of normal. I'm not really interested in the percent of normal. I'm interested in the raw numbers down here. Oh, maybe this. Okay, hey, guy from Brazil. Is this like a state in Brazil? Yeah, so maybe we'll bring that on as well. So probably that would probably go first. So state. Okay, so that's going to be my goal. It's going to be able to look through this file, which has, what does this have? How many days does it have on it? Oh, it's just got, this is just 1 week. So this is November 4th through November 10th. And then these are all the different places. Okay, any questions about what we're going to try to do and before we dive in to do it? Go ahead. Oh. So you think these are actually no longer Brazil, but this is Colombia? Major cities in Colombia. Colombia. So what is this? So that's like that's a subdivision of Brazil. Yeah. So I guess, we call states because they're presumably like sovereign countries. So I don't mind calling it a state. We'll leave the header as state. So that's interesting. Okay. But that doesn't change what we're after, right? So we're going to try to pull that data, put it into the right columns, and maybe our columns aren't quite named right. But then again, we don't speak whatever language this is in. Well, station call, percent of normal. I guess this is English. Monthly precipitation tabulation. It's just that some of these names are not familiar with me. I'm not familiar. Is Sao Paulo a state? Yeah. Okay, good. That should work fine. Oh, really? East Coast states, but I don't think those are. Yeah, I don't think that's the United States. But anyway, I think that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to say, oh look, find this text that's between the stars over here and put it into column A. We could change the name later. Let's get the data. All right. So I'm going to save this. Let's do this. I think I'm going to put those files into like a subfolder. No, I'll leave them at the same. I'll put them in the same location. So wherever I downloaded those 3 files, let me go ahead and save this workbook in that same place. That way we can write the same code to find out where those files are. We'll use a relative reference from the position of the workbook. So I'm going to call this parse text. And that will be fall 21. Save it as an XLSM. All right, now we'll come to my code. I've already inserted a module. So if you don't have a module in the workbook, insert a module so you've got some place to do the code. And we'll make a sub procedure. I'll call it import all data. So import all data is going to, I'm going to kind of want to loop through all of the .data files that are in that folder. We may get to doing that one today, we may not, but the one that we really want to build out is called import one file. And I encourage you to kind of take this as you're thinking about the database project. It's similar in that we've got a bunch of source files that we have to work with. Those are Excel files. Today we're working with text files. But rather than trying to have one procedure that does everything, I encourage you to kind of set it up like this, where you've got one that's going to loop through the files, and it will send the information about one file off to the one that's going to actually do the work for one file. Because what that will let us do, I'll come here and do my Acme subrunner. So import one file is going to need to have a variable declared here as a parameter. I'll just call it path as a string. And so now I can't just run this one directly, because to run this, I've got to supply a path. And so let me go ahead and say import one file, and the path I'm going to send it is this workbook dot path concatenated with. Now I think what we're doing in class today should work fine on Mac, on the Mac version. So my temptation is to come here and say concatenated with a backslash, but the path separation character for Mac is different than that. Well, fortunately, I can ask for what the path separation character is. I'll say application.path separator. And so that'll give me a backslash if we're executing on Windows. It'll give me a forward slash for executing on Mac. So this will work, fine either way. And then I'll concatenate onto that the name of one of these files. So WSI underscore 2008-11 data. Then over here in my import one file, just to kind of make sure that we're getting the information I'm expecting to have here, I'm going to call my Acme subrunner here, and that should then call import one file and path this whole path to it into the path variable. When I print path here, it should then print out the actual location onto my computer where that thing is. So I'll come up here and run that, and that looks great. So that's the path. But of course, as long as those files are saved in the same folder where my Excel workbook is, then I don't have to actually know the path, because I can say relative to the path of this workbook, where are those files? Right, the same place. Okay, how are we doing? Questions here? Okay. Yes, go ahead. Oh, okay. If you're getting HTTPS for your path instead of C:, that means you're saved on some web accessible location, probably OneDrive. So get that thing saved onto something that starts with a C:/. Like save it to a different location on your computer. I can't tell you exactly where to save it. VBA is not happy with a path that does not start with a letter and then a colon, at least on Windows. On Mac, it's not going to start with a letter, which will be okay. But yeah, it can't be like stored on a OneDrive cloud location so that brings up that HTTPS thing in the front. Okay. Okay, so what that means now is that for our import one file, we now have one file that we're working on. Let's go ahead and open it. So here's how we open a file. Okay, close my chat. So here's the syntax. I'm going to say open, and then I'm going to put the full path to the file. Well, that's passed into us in the path variable. And then I've got to tell it what mode we're opening it for. So we're going to open this for input. Input. And so the mode here for input is like from the perspective of my program. The program is going to see this as data coming into it. And so that's why we call it input. In a sense, the data is coming out of the file. So you might think it's output, but it's from the perspective of the program that I'm running. So this is going to be bringing data in from the file. If I'm going to open it for output, it's going to be to push data out to the file, to write data out to the file. There's a couple of other modes. the other one that's that I've used quite a bit is for binary. So binary kind of lets us both read and write to a file while it's open. But we're just going to open this for input. We're going to bring data from the text file into Excel to be able to process. Then we're going to say as number, and I'm going to give it a number, number 1. This syntax that we're looking at for manipulating files goes back to the 1970s, before the days of object-oriented programming, definitely when BASIC had no notion of object orientation. And so today, if we're thinking, well, how would we work this? We'd expect there to be some kind of object that knows how to work with a file, and there would be methods and properties that go with it. This part of the language was built before that notion was common. And so we can have multiple, and if it was an object, we could have multiple instances of the object all open on different files, and we could kind of work back and forth with them, kind of similar to other objects we've worked with. But this part of the language goes back before that. And so we can have multiple files open simultaneously, and it's that number that we use to keep them separate. So we could open up like 3 files for input, files number 1, 2, and 3, and we could open up a file for output, number 4, and we could say, oh, read some stuff from 1, read some stuff from 2, read some stuff from 3, put it together, write it out to 4. So that number is going to allow us to keep multiple files open simultaneously and keep them straight, which one we're dealing with. Now, we're only going to be working with 1 file at a time, but we still have to identify the number. So that's what that is. And you'll see that when we're referring to the file, that number is going to be important to us. Now, as soon as I open a file, I know that I'm going to have to close it. So let me go ahead and just close it, and then I'll work between the open and the close. Here's how I close a file. Close number 1. Wonderful. So I haven't done anything with the file, but anything to access the data in that file, I'm going to have to work between the open and the close. Now, one of the really interesting things about this approach to working with files is that the VBA never actually reads that whole file into memory. So if you're working with some kind of huge text file where you say, wow, this file is like over a gigabyte in size. One text, can you have a text file more than a gigabyte in size? Sure. And many of the ways that you might try to manipulate that file are going to be like, that file is too big. I'll try to load it, and you'll let it sit for a while, and then eventually the program will crash because it's taking up too much memory. So, but what we're doing here is we're never reading the whole file in. Right now it's open, so we can say, go read some of the data off the disk, but we're not trying to read the whole thing in. So this is really nice for today's environment, because if you've got to process through a huge file, this will do quite nicely for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through this file 1 line at a time. So instead of reading the whole file into memory, which is the way that most approaches today do it now, we're going to say, no, just read 1 line. And we'll take a look at that line, decide what to do with it. And so let's see how to read a line. So there's a statement called line input. You tell it the file number you're working with, number 1. And then we have to give it a variable name to read that file into, to read that line into. I'm going to call it 1 line, maybe with a capital L. That means I'm going to have a variable created up here. So let me dim 1 line as a string. Okay, so I'm calling a line input statement. We're going to say, all right, I've now opened a reference to that file. We haven't read anything from the file. When we say line input, it's going to read all the characters until it gets to the carriage return character. In fact, we might take a minute and just kind of peek at that so we can see what that really looks like. And then we're going to print that line off. So if I run this, we should get the path, and then we should get the first line of the file, whatever it is. So we go back and look at that file. That should be the top line. Yeah, WSI Corporation, monthly precipitation tabulation. So that's that first line off the file. Questions? Just kind of show me on a scale of 1 to 5, 0 to 5, when I say that in this file, there is, I'm not sure if it's, yeah, that right here is a non-printable character. It's a character that you don't see, that when the word processor reads it, it goes, oh, I'm just supposed to start down on the next line. How many of you go, yeah, I totally get that, 5. I understand that, 5. How many are like, that's bizarre to me. What do you mean, print character you can't see? So I'm seeing only 5s, 4s and 5s, which means I'm not going to talk about it. Okay. So it's that non-printable character that's actually, and again, this file is actually one long stream of data. There's that non-printable character that what VBA is doing, it's reading until it finds that non-printable character and it says, oh, that's the first line. And then it's returning that. The next time I call this, it's going to start right after that non-printable character, and it's going to read again until it finds the next end of line character. And so, in fact, if I was interested in saying I want to see the second line, I'll just do 2 line inputs. I'm going to read the first line and put it in 1 line. I'm going to read the second line, put that in 1 line. What happens to the first line? Where does the first line go by the time I read the second line? Yeah, poof, it's gone. It was in memory at that location, and now that variable holds something different. So what am I expecting to see for the second line? If I go back and look at my file, June should be June to 10/9/08. We'll go ahead and run this again. Let me clear off my thing. Yeah, so now I'm getting that second line. And good news is the second line actually has the data that I'm interested in. So let me just peek at one of these other files because it's kind of interesting the way that it's structured. So I actually probably should just open up Notepad again. We'll look at all the files. And let me do, there's 11.6.3. One of these has only a few days in it. Let's try the one with the 3 on it. Yeah. So I look at this one, it's quite a bit different. Now the other one I had open had 7 days, had a whole week of data, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's got 7 days. This one only has 3, why? It's because we are only going to put 1 month into this file. So if I've got, you know, this is the end of a week, but it's only the first 3 days of November, this goes into its own file, which tells me that when I get to my second line here, all of these are going to be for November of 08. Everything in this file is going to be November of 08. And so I'm going to pull the month and the year here because when I get down to actually the information that tells me which day it happened on, the month and the year aren't here. And so I'm going to have to keep track of that separately. All right, so let's think about it. So here I am in my code. I've just read in the second line. So I've got that in my 1 line variable. Let me declare a variable up here called MOYR, month year, as a string. Now, how am I going to get the month and the year? Any thoughts? How am I going to get those exact characters? Well, one way to think about it, I'll tell you a way that won't work. It's kind of tempting. One way to think about it is to say, well, maybe it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Maybe it's just the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21. Anyway, maybe it's just starting at the 18th character and taking those next 6 characters, 7 characters. Are you comfortable with that? Why not? Yeah, the thing that I'm really worried about is what happens when this is, you know, some different summary. If this is January in here, is this thing going to move over? And so, okay, so now give me something. So you're not comfortable with my first suggestion. So give me a suggestion of your own that you are comfortable with. Okay, I like in string. So let's get to in string, and you're saying, hey, let's look for November. NOV. The problem with that is I don't even know November yet. I mean, I might be able to infer it from the file name. It's 11, probably can get there, but I think the approach is good. There's a better thing to look for than November. Yeah, so you can say, oh, just keep going until I hit something that's numeric here. Yeah, so this would work. This would work pretty well because now I don't have to know that it's November, so it's a little simpler that way. But there's no way to just say search for a integer. I would have to kind of look at the first character, which I could do, and say, is that numeric? Is that numeric? And keep doing until I can make a loop to do that. There's a simpler way. Two. Ah, so I could actually look for the word two. We think that's going to be stable. Yeah, I like that. I like even better to look for the position of the hyphen. Because that, you know, when I find that hyphen, I go, great. In fact, that's exactly where I need to start taking the data from, is where the hyphen is. So let's go ahead and take that approach. I'll declare another variable to keep track of the position of a character. So I'll call that POS. That's an abbreviation for position, people, as an integer. Integer probably okay. Do I expect, because I'm working with only one line at a time, so am I expecting to have a line that's longer than 32,000 characters long? No, this is probably not going to have anything longer than 80 characters long. I could probably get by with byte, but I'm going to use integer. Okay, so I've got that line. So now let me just go ahead and say here, position equals in string, starting at the first character, looking at one line, looking for the hyphen. Let me go ahead and I'll run this and stop it there. So I can see, I can kind of ask what my position is. 18. And that's actually where that hyphen is. So I think I just want the next 7 characters from that. So let me go ahead and use moyear. Moyear is equal to the mid of one line, starting at the position and taking 7 characters. And let's see what moyear is now. Yeah. So now, oh wait, do I want that leading hyphen? I'm thrilled to have that leading hyphen because ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the actual day, I'm going to concatenate it with the moyear, and that's going to give me a whole, I mean, the hyphen, I want the hyphen eventually. Because all I'm really doing this for is to be able to put a date into a cell in Excel. Okay. Step 1 done. We've got the month and the year recorded for what we're going to have to record. We ready to move on, or do you want to look at the code a little bit more? Back to the code. This code is kind of narrow. Let me push it over there. Bring this one over here. Maybe go a little smaller. Can you still see that okay? Those numbers okay to work with? Go ahead with the question. So first question is, have you saved the workbook? Because when you ask for the workbook path, if it hasn't been saved, it's a null value. So you got to make sure it's saved in the same location where those data files are. Let's see, other Mac users who are following along, it's working for you okay? Yeah, okay. Yes.
I'm not a Mac user, but when I ran the Acme sub that last time, the whole like June through 10 November, like we did split it.
So when you said, well, we haven't actually, the code doesn't print this out. I just came in, we're in break mode, and I just printed this out here. So yeah, it's not It's not printing it up. It's just kind of me doing some debugging. Okay. Actually, could be even narrower on the code. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now, so it seems like this data kind of comes in two sets. That we've got the first block here that tells me information about being the percent of normal. So I'm seeing information about June, July, August, September, how much percent. Okay, so this is like not daily stuff. This is like going back and showing me kind of a whole month in prior months, apparently. I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is this stuff where I'm actually getting the daily numbers. I want the raw data here. So how am I going to find? I don't know how many lines there's going to be here. So what I need to do is just keep reading lines until I find a line that's one that I'm interested in. So any thoughts on what I could search for, or as I read a line in, how can I know that I'm getting close to the data that I want? Because even if I was to start here on this line, I would feel pretty comfortable about saying, well, the data I'm after is just like 7 or 8 lines down. So from once I find that line, I could go, okay, read 8 more lines, and I'm where I want to be to get the data. Yeah, go ahead.
It looks like if the line starts with either a $sign or an asterisk.
Ah, okay. So here, so if a $sign or an asterisk, so the ones I'm after are these down here. And so that might be pretty good, but trouble is I'm going to run into those here as well. So I need some kind of an algorithm that I can say, okay, kind of read forward to the right place and ignore data until I find something, and then I know I'm oriented in this file. So I think looking for a $sign or asterisk on the first character might help, but I see that in both blocks that I'm after. So other thoughts? Scroll down so we can kind of actually see the data that we're after too. So down here is the raw data that we're after. And the way it goes is that this kind of repeats. I've got the summary data, raw data. In the next set, summary data, raw data, summary data, raw data. I'm going to come look at it from your perspective. Any thoughts? You guys are really, really bright people. Go ahead.
So in the first line input, get the name of the region. You can store that in a variable and then find it again.
Ah, okay. So what you're saying here is that I could kind of come down here to the first $sign. Oh, this. So find the first line that kind of starts with 3 stars, or maybe a space and 3 stars. Pull this and say, okay, that's what I'm looking for. And then keep reading lines until I find it again. I like it. Yeah, that would do it. Nice, nice work. Other thoughts? I'm not going to do that one because I know an easier one. But let's give you kind of, but this is kind of what this process is I'm looking at this file that was never meant to be read by a computer. It's meant to be read by a human. And I've got to somehow convince the computer, it's not very smart, convince that computer to say, we figured out how to find the data. The one your suggestion would work great. Go ahead.
Would it, like the character number 10 found where the character number 10 is immediately followed by another character? Because it seems like those lower lines are the only ones that start like all the way on the left margin.
So, character, like the 10th character in.
No, like the character that tells it to go to the next line.
So kind of look for the carriage return character. With the approach I'm taking where I'm reading line by line, I don't have access to the carriage return character. I have access to everything until it happens. Now, we could change to where we're reading character by character. It's a different approach. And then we would be able to see those characters, but I'm going to stick with the line at a time. Okay. So here's what I like. Here, actually, the next data that I need is right here. because this is where I get the actual days that this data is after, that these data are for. So I've got the month and the year, but as I look at this data, I'm going to have to pull in this to know these are my days that I'm going to need here. And if I look right over here, the last 4 characters of this line are norm. And up here, they're dealing with percent of normal here, but it's the different abbreviation. So if I just keep reading lines until I find one where the last 4 characters is norm, I actually, that will actually leave the line that I want is the one I've got right at that moment. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and bring myself into a loop right here. I'll just do a do loop. Do loop. Anytime I make a do loop, I'm going to be sure I put in do events. And I'm going to do until, and I think I'd be fine putting the condition either on the loop or on the until, on the do or on the loop. Either one would be fine here because I know it's not the line I'm currently on. Until the rightmost characters of one line, rightmost 4 characters of one line is equal to norm. Now, I'm not quite sure if there's a space after that or not. I can see I can highlight the space here, and I'm not able to highlight that. So I think that really is the end of the line. And let me go ahead and just stop there. So I'll just drag back. I can run it from the beginning, or I can just kind of drag back up here and run this. And so now that's kind of done that loop until I got into the loop. I should be able to look at one line up here. And what do I have? Yeah, that's not what I'm after. Oh, what's that? Yeah, you're right. I want that stop to be after the loop, not here, but I do need to read the line inside the loop. Yeah, so I wasn't quite thinking right. So I've got to read the line in the loop and then stop after the loop. There we go. So now I've got the data that I'm after. And it's sitting right here in one line. So I've read a bunch of times until I found that line, and that's the one where I've got to pull off these days. How comfortable are we with this structure right here? Show me 0 to 5. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Wonderful. Okay. So how am I going to get this now? How am I going to get to this part of the data? Okay, so we could just kind of do some kind of loop here until we find the first character. I think that would be okay. But as I'm looking at this, if I'm going to kind of scroll down, let me just kind of put where this data starts. My insertion point, it's kind of starting in the same space every time. That 4 is right in the same place. So I think I'm comfortable saying, let me just come into this character. It's probably like something like 40 characters in. Let me just kind of look, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24. Let's go 24 characters in, and then let's read 40 characters and see what that gives us. So I'm just going to kind of play with this over here and say, I want to see the mid of one line beginning at 24 characters and taking 40. What is that going to give me? O-N-E line. It's got a couple spaces in the beginning, a couple spaces at the end, but I haven't picked up that total. So I kind of like that for getting the string that has those numbers. So I'm going to declare a variable here called data. I'm going to do this one as variant, because I'm going to treat this as a string for a while, and then I'm going to want to treat it as an array. So let me go ahead and call, actually not data, let me call this, I'll call this days. I'm making a variable called days. And now that I'm here, I'm going to say days equals the mid part of that. Let me move my stop down here, run again. So now in days, I should have that same string. Now, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to get that to be, ultimately, I want this to be an array of however many it takes. Like on that file that only had 3 days, I'd want to have 3 elements in the array. This one was 7, I want to have 7 elements in the array. So I know we've talked about the split function, but I don't think we've used it yet in class. That's what the split function does. It takes a string, based on a delimiter, it will split that string up into an array separated by whatever delimiter I tell it to be. Trouble is, I need to have just like one, I need to have something exactly the same separating these. So I could split it based on, what is that, 3 spaces? It's 4 spaces. I can say split it on 4 spaces, but when I get here, there's only 3 between this. So I think what I would like to do is I would like to get this thing so it's just 1 space between each character. Fortunately, there's a function in Excel that just would do that perfectly for me. Who knows what it's called? Yeah. What does trim do? Well, unnecessary, I mean, that's, kind of in the eye of the beholder. It removes all leading and trailing space. And if there are any multiple spaces together in the middle of the string, it collapses those down to 1. It's really kind of a neat function. It's just exactly what we need here. So how do I get to that function? Worksheet function dot, oh wow, days is a worksheet function. Interesting. That's not what I want. Worksheet function dot trim. And I will pass it days. And so now that gives me that same data, no leading spaces, no trailing spaces, and only 1 space in the middle. So let me go ahead and kind of, maybe I'll just do that on the next line. I'll say days equals now this. And now I want days to actually be the array. So I'll say days equals split days. And I'll tell it to split on a space. So now I should be able to ask for days sub 0, and it'll give me the first one. Days sub 1 gives me the next one. Days sub 6 should give me the 10th. Should give me the 7th value, which will be a 10. All right, so I've successfully now read the days that I'm going to need. Whew. Ready to move on? Question, go ahead.
The split function changes the variable into an array.
No, the split. So the question is, what's going on with this split function? We had a string here, now it's an array. What's going on? So that's the reason that we declared this variable as a variant, because I'm going to treat it like a string for a little bit, and then I want to treat it like an array. And that's what variant good for. It's like, change from one to the other. And so this is going to hold a string. This will return a string. This one returns a string, and so it behaves like a string. This one returns an array. So it doesn't change the variable. It's the assignment that's changing the variable because this is returning an array. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the suggestion that came up here before. This is my next piece of data that I need is right here. And so I'm going to have another loop similar to this one. I'll just bring it down here. And I'm going to continue reading lines until I get one that begins with. So the left of, and then let's trim one line. So that'll get rid of leading spaces. So I want till the left 3 characters is equal to star, star, star. And then once that runs, I should have the next line that I need to get data off of. Yeah.
So when would you want to create a different sub procedure to this?
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is, hey, wouldn't it be better here to create a function called advance2 and then pass it what I'm kind of interested in advancing to? Yeah, I kind of like that. But the reason that I'm not doing that here is because what I'm actually looking for here is different. So here, I'm looking for the rightmost 4 characters. Here, I'm looking for the leftmost 3 characters, but I'm trimming the one line. So that would be a little bit, I could probably do it as a function, and maybe it would be more maintainable, but we've got 20 minutes, so I'm kind of hurrying through this. It might be better to do exactly what you're suggesting, but it would definitely take longer. Yeah, in fact, anytime you say, oh, great, just copy that block of code, put it in here again and make some modifications to it, that should be a warning. So good, that was a warning. Good. Question, yeah, go ahead.
Is there going to be a problem because aren't there cases where an asterisk is just any character?
So there's going to be some that start with a single. Oh, you're saying, is that like a wild card?
Yeah.
And the answer is, for equality in VBA, the answer is no. So we're actually looking for a character. This is going to be true when the leftmost 3 characters after being trimmed is actually those 3 characters. Now, there's another operator in VBA called like, not equals, but like. And then I have used it a handful of times, and I would have to kind of look up the help to see how to use it. But it may very well be that would be a different answer for that one. Okay, let's see. Have I run that already? Let's look at one line. And what do we have now? Yeah. Okay, so I ran that loop, and now I've got this. So I think what I'm going to do at this point, so this is going to be my state. I don't think I need to. Oh yeah, I'm going to have to put the state on multiple lines. So I'm going to have to record. I'm going to record that state. So let me go ahead and declare a variable. Dim state as a string. And now I'm going to say state is equal to, and it looks like that's that whole line. Let me just replace the stars in that line. Replace, looking at one line, looking for an asterisk, and replace it with a 0-length string. So that should get rid of all the asterisks, and then we just trim this. Now I'm going to use the VBA trim here because VBA's trim function only deals with leading and trailing spaces, doesn't do anything in the middle. And since I don't have excess spaces in the middle, I'm going to use the native one. It's going to be slightly more efficient, but it's less code to write, and so I'm going to favor it. So once I've gotten to that line, I should be able to run that and see what my state is. Okay. So now I've got the state, and I want to hold that in a variable because I'm going to be writing, once I get to my data, I'm going to write out 7 pieces of data that I'm going to have the state multiple times. And so I don't just want to write that out to the worksheet and put it in a variable so that I can write it out multiple times. Oh. All right, let's go back up to the top where we actually are. Okay, so I've just gotten this. So how should I get to the next? What should I do to get to where my data starts now? Yeah, just read 2 more lines. I like it. So at this point, I should have the first line here. Now, ultimately, I'm going to want to put that in a loop, but let me get it working first to be able to pull this data off just one at a time. Okay, so I'll run those 2, and that should give me my one line, then should be the one I'm after. Yeah, so I've got this. All right, now this looks and feels to me a lot like fixed width data. And so I think to pull the, so this is going, what is this? Is this the city? Well, this is the station. That's the weather station. So some of these are cities. Some of them probably are not quite cities. And maybe that's the difference between the asterisk and the $sign. I don't know if you guys could tell me that, answer that, but that's fine. So I think I want to take this, start with the second character and take how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'll take 11 because it looks like there's always got to be a space in there. So I'll take those 11 characters. Okay, so this is my station. Declare a variable for station. I declared it as a string, yes. Station is going to equal the mid of one line, starting at the second character and taking 11 characters. And then I think I'm going to trim that right here. So we'll just nest this. The truth is, up here, when I did all these 3 with days, I could have done all of this on one line just by taking this expression and plugging it in here for days, and then taking that whole expression and plugging it in here for days. I could have done that with just one line. In fact, if I was writing it for myself, that's probably what I would have done, but I wanted you to kind of see the individual steps. Here, I am doing 2 on one. Just kind of look at this line and just show me how comfortable you are, 0 to 5. 5, 5, 5, 5, no problem. Nesting functions you've got, excellent. So I'll run that and I should have my station. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like, yeah, it ends there where it's supposed to end. Okay, so now this is good. The call is going to be simple. So it's going to be similar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's going to start in the 14th character. And I'll take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe I'll take 8. I'm not sure if we'll get larger calls than that, but I'll start at 14 and take 8. So it'll give me a variable for call. Call is a problem because call is a reserved word in VBA. So I'm going to call it the call as a string. The call equals mid of one line, beginning at the, what did I say, 14th and taking 8? It's like I've got my call number that I'm after. Whew. Now I think the only, is that right? Let me go back and look. Is that all I need? Station, call, date, and precip. Okay, well, I'm kind of set up for my date. I've got my days and I've got my month year, but I need to pull in the precipitation. That precipitation is going to be really almost exactly the same as when I pulled in my days, right? They're in columns in those same columns. We'll get trace here. That'll be okay. So maybe I'll come up here and make another variable. I'll call this one data as variant. And take this block that works on days. Looks like that had to reset my code. That's fine. Oh, probably because I changed the name of the variable. I typed it wrong to begin with. So now I should be able to say data equals that. So I've just got that same block where before I was working with days, now I'm working with data, but I should have an array now. Data that actually has the data should be the same size as the days array. And I'll run this to there. Go ahead and look at data sub 0. And that one should be 0. If I look at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 should be a 9. There's a 0. Data sub 4 is a 9. Data sub 6 should be that 8. Okay, so I've got an array actually holding the data. So now, I think now I've put together all of the data that I need to be able to write out the first set of actual data out to my sheet. Any questions before we move to that part of the project? All right, so I'm going to need something to keep track of where I am on the sheet. So let's do this. I'm going to declare a variable called row as an integer. Oh, maybe I'll do this as long because I'm using it to refer to rows on the worksheet. And why don't I go ahead and initialize row at 2 because my first row is my header. So let's say row equals 2. So I've declared row, I've set it equal to 2 at the very top. Now I'm going to come down and use that to start writing data. So cells, let's put this on the default sheet. So cells, row, column number 1 dot value is equal to my station, equal to my state, right? Column 2 is equal to my station. Column 3 is the call. And then column 4 is going to begin the data. I'm going to write this for the first element of the array, and then we'll go back and put a loop in it. So column 4, remember, because I've got my dates in an array and I've got my data in an array. They'll be the same size. So column 4 is going to be, let's see, what is column 4? Column 4 is the date. So column 4 is going to be days sub 0 concatenated with MOYR. So I'll take the, I'm going to take the day from the array and concatenate it with my month year variable. And then column 5 is just going to be what's in my data array at that same position. So I'll run that block and that should put that first line in. Row got defined up above and it hasn't got its 2 yet. So it's trying to refer to row number 0. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my code and just run it again. I think I am. Yeah, even converted that into a date. Brought my information in. I'm feeling pretty good. But I need this whole block. Well, and then once I've done that, I need to increment row. Row equals row plus 1. I want this whole block to run for however many entries I have in my days. So I'm going to give myself a control variable for that. Let me just go ahead and dim x as an integer. Actually, I'll dim it as a byte because the most it's going to have is 7. And I'll use that to wrap a loop around here for x equals 0 to the upper boundary of data. And remember, days and data will be the same size. And so now instead of bringing days 0, I will bring days x. So 0 the first time, 2 the second time, and so forth. the same call. I've got the different dates and the precipitation. So I've taken what was on that row in the printed report and I've put it onto 4 rows or to 7 rows in my Excel data. Questions? Well, we've just gotten the first one. There's a lot more to go. But from now, it's just kind of repeat what we've got. I think we've got everything that we need here, just figuring out how to control it. Go ahead.
Wait, actually, so why don't you have to do the upper bound -1?
So upper boundary is the last index that I'm after. It's not a count, it's the upper boundary. Okay, well, now let me just find out what's the part that I want to repeat, because now I want to continue, kind of if I go back to my data, I want to do this, I want to keep doing this until I get a blank line. So let's go ahead and at the bottom of this, let's read the next line in. So we've just print that data out. I'm reading the next line in. Station and the call is going to be the same. The data is going to be different. So from right here, I need to put a do loop around this. I'm going to put a do loop and tab this in. And I think once I read a line and it's blank, I think I want to stop. Let me put my do events in here, just in case I've missed something. And I want to loop until one line is equal to a 0-length string. And I'm pretty sure this line, there's no space on this. It really is just an empty line. Probably hard to see that from way back there. I'll darken it in for you. Thank you. UNTIL. Yes.
Still at the loop part, because once it reaches the blank line, it's going to read in the data and it'll run through X as well.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, should we put this up here? Yeah. Right? And the answer is the only difference between having it at the top and at the bottom is it going to run through the code once? Because if you think about it, if I do the comparison here, what's the very next thing it's going to do if it doesn't let me out of the loop? It's going to come right up here and do that same comparison. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to go through the loop once. There's going to be one row of data. And then this will let me out when I get to the end. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop my code and run that again. And hopefully that's brought in a bunch of data. January. Yeah, this is all, that all supposed to be January? No, January, I've got to read the call and the station in with the rest of the data. So I've got that a little bit wrong. So this belongs inside the loop. And maybe at the very beginning, I'm going to put a line to clear off my data. Active sheet dot used range. That's going to be all the data on the sheet. I'm going to offset that one row, and then I'm going to clear it. So that's going to give me the range for all the data. I'm just going to kind of shift that one down, and then that'll leave my headers in place. Turn my caps lock off. Yeah, so now I've got the state for this whole block, the station and call for these 7, a new station and new call for the next 7, and so forth. Only thing I have left to do now is to make this happen, the whole thing happen over and over again. And so we're out of time to do that. But what I'll do here after I dismiss class, I'll go ahead and put that code in so that when I post it, you've got the full example. It's just going to be putting a loop around there and then checking to make sure that we haven't run past the end of the file while we're looking for the next block of data and letting us out. Oh, what I did at the top? Yeah. Okay, any questions? Excellent. I will see you on Monday. Class dismissed. And maybe I'll go ahead and keep talking through this for the recording. All right, so let me just think about where I am here. It's like thinking, talking out loud here. I am going to, this point, I probably just want to keep going until I hit the next norm. So it looks like this is going to be where I'm going to want to start another loop. So I'm going to do here, and I'll loop way down here. So once I'm out of there, that should take me up, look for the next norm. Actually, I think that's going to do the trick. I'm going to indent all of this. Do end loop. And this should do until it's when I'm looking for norm that's going to be a problem. So here, I'm going to have a way to actually let me out of the code altogether. So let me look here and say if, and here's actually where I can ask the file, have I read to the end of the file? So I'm going to say if EOF, it's a built-in statement of the language. EOF stands for end of file, number 1, then, let me just put a stop here for now. I think that loop will actually pull in all the data. Yeah, Sao Paulo, East Coast states, Colombia. Looks like it's bringing it all in just right. The question is, what am I going to do here? Because if I exit do, it's going to let me out of this loop, but it'll leave me in this loop. So what don't I do at this point? Why don't I say exit sub? And now that brings in the data, finishes running, and I'm good to go. So there is that example fully written out. I'm going to go ahead and end the class. Thanks for joining.